As old as the concept of a state itself. But what we need to do today is sort of establish a working definition of the deep state. And I want us to explore one thinker in particular, who is Peter Dale Scott, who we will use as the working definition. So before we go into the definition, our assignment today is I would like you to look at Wikipedia, pull down Peter Dale Scott, and just do your own summation. Now, maybe some of you are familiar with him, maybe some of you have actually read his work, but by and large, I don't think he's a household name. Make note of his background, his education, his scholarship, and kind of make sense of what he's been writing about for the last 40 years. And my take on it, I'll just give you a little glimpse into what I see. I've read him extensively over the years. You can basically bookend what he's done between JFK, the Warren Report, and 9/11, and the official narrative we have there, and that body of work in between. And what comes to your mind when you're looking at that body work in light of this mind, this scholar who produced it? And I want you to think about that a little bit. But heads up, one of the things that you're going to see is a lot of criminal activity. And so it kind of gets us thinking, well, what is the deep state up to? So I want us to go over a little bit of the definition, and it can get extensive. There's many scholars that have contributed to this, but most of the modern scholars attribute the working definition to Peter Dale Scott's definition. By the way, when Peter Dale Scott was criticized, in fact, his publisher, for peer reviewing some of the material about the Warren Report, he felt, call me crazy, but I thought the job of higher education and academia was to open minds rather than to close them. And one of the questions I'll have for you today will be some of your experiences in higher education, and if you've ever found faculty that have in fact been dedicated to opening minds. But let us start out here a little bit for Peter Dale Scott. He's going to talk about a system of politics in which accountability is conspicuously or consciously diminished. So politics is constant accountability, sometimes called transparency. Generally, covert politics and the conduct of affairs not by rational debate and responsible decision-making, but by indirection, collusion, and deceit. Collusion, there's another C word you'll see here in the definition that follows. Essentially, they're the same word, but collusion will get you peer-reviewed. The other word, not so much. The first political exploration of irresponsible agencies and parastructures such as intelligence agencies. So we have this idea of one, accountability being diminished, conduct of the public affairs, not rational debate. So we get something that's not taking place in our capitals, but perhaps with collusion and deceit somewhere on the down low. And in addition, he calls it a dual state, a state in which one can distinguish between a public state, visible state, and a top-down deep state. The deep state emerges into a false flag violence. It's organized by the military and military intelligence apparatuses and involves their link to organized crime. Hence, probably these connections over the years that he's made with his, frankly, amazing research into the deep state. Most states exploit this duality, but to varying degrees. In America, the duality on the state has become more and more acute since World War II. So there's degrees of this, I guess, in different countries. In his mind, in America, it's become more acute since World War II. So for our exercise today, what I want us to do is kind of bring to the discussion your assessment of Peter Dale Scott, If you're familiar with him, please tell us your experience with him. If you're new to him, please tell us your first impressions of at least just looking over his body of work. And it's kind of a casual exercise today. I want us to tell about your experience in higher education or in high school, professors or instructors that have opened your mind rather than closed them, that dared to challenge some of these assumptions that maybe decision-making can take place outside the democratic process, that sometimes events in histories aren't completely accidental, but perhaps done as a product of collusion or orchestration. Think about the idea that we tend to be dual-minded. We say that we're skeptical of government, but yet we are sort of scared to challenge the official narrative of government. And that's what an investigation of the dual state is all about. Finally, I want to put out, in the same vein as Peter Dale Scott, a scholar by the name of John McMurtry, another Canadian-born scholar. The article, "The Moral Decoding of 9/11 Beyond the U.S. Criminal State," very much in the same vein. In my experience as an instructor, it's implicit that you can't speak about 9/11 to the extent that you'd challenge the official narrative. And it's not so much because the pressures you would get from faculty or people perhaps from the outside walking into the classroom and investigating it, but from students themselves, there's some apprehension. And again, that's the bookcase with Peter Dale Scott between the Warren Report and the investigation of 9/11 and all of that activity in between, and kind of creating enough links to put together this working definition. But what's fascinating about McMurtry's work here is it's far beyond just piling up the mountain of evidence that problematizes the official narrative and really looks into the moral decoding. And he's a professor of philosophy, and it gives you perhaps a little insight as we go forward into the mind and the motives of the actors within the deep state. So next time we're going to look at some of the best foundational scholarship in the 20th century out of the deep state, which comes actually out of Nazi Germany, the foundation of it, that will essentially underpin many of the neocon thinkers at the University of Chicago and so forth. So I'll see you then.